Good morning and welcome to Veteran-Owned Small Business Certification for Government Contracting. I'm Cindy Nellis. I'm the director here at PennWest Clarion Small Business Development Center, and we're glad that you have joined us. Before we get started, a few different housekeeping items. We have muted you and your videos are disabled. So if you have questions for our presenters, we ask that you use the Q&A. If you have questions or comments for me, your host, I would just ask that you use the chat box. To get started, I'd like to introduce you to the Small Business Development Center. So let me start with that. The Small Business Development Center, we are a part of the Pennsylvania network of small business development centers. Our mission is to help businesses start, grow, and prosper. And we do that through our business consulting services that are no cost and confidential. We provide those one-on-one. And so as you have need, we just ask that you connect with us and request our assistance. We also provide training, and today is an example of that. We love to collaborate with our partners. And so we do seminars and webinars. Most are no cost, some are low cost. Most are live, virtual, or on demand. So there's a lot of different options of connecting with us with training. And the great thing about our statewide network, and when it comes to webinars, is that you can connect with any SBDC in Pennsylvania and enjoy the training that they are offering. Our network also provides a lot of tools and resources. You can get access to them by becoming a client of the Small Business Development Center. These are databases that are used for market and industry research, as well as a lot of forums and templates that we have as well. Okay, the Pennsylvania Small Business Development statewide network is made up of 15 centers. We are all located at institutions of higher education, so you can see the map. My particular center covers the largest footprint, 10 counties located in north central Pennsylvania. We are able to provide no cost services because we're funded through our host institution, through the Small Business Administration, and through the Partnership for Regional Economic Performance, which is state funding through the Department of Community and Economic Development. I also want to mention that the PennWest Clarion Small Business Development Center, we are part of the WEDNET PA program, as is North Central. And this is a funding program to help you, our business owners, keep the skills of your employees at a competitive level. And so it does provide funding to you. This particular funding is your company needs to be eligible, the employee needs to be eligible, and the training needs to be eligible, but it does potentially provide funding of up to $2,000 per employee. So if you're interested in finding more out, just submit an inquiry at wednetpa.com. And this is information about how you connect with us. I will follow up today's webinar with the recording, as well as information of how you can become a client of the SBDC, as well as all of the different resources and slide presentations that you see today. So that's our information. I would like to turn this over to our speakers to deliver our content today. That's why you're here. Our main speaker today is Aaron Ritzig, and he is the government contracting specialist at the Northwest Commission Apex Accelerator. He covers Venango Forest and Mercer counties. Also Barb Brennan, who is the procurement outreach specialist for North Central Apex Accelerator. And we also have joining us Melissa Becker, who is also with the Northwest Commission Apex Accelerator as a government contracting specialist covering Clarion, Crawford, and Lawrence counties. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and Aaron, I will turn it over to you. And thank you so much for being here. We're excited to be celebrating the Veterans Month, honoring veterans. And so we're excited to have you here.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. I am actually going to pass things off to Barb. Barb, if you would like to do your bit first, for those of you who are on, Barb is going to do a little bit about what is an Apex Accelerator. Just introduce you to the program for those of you who may be unfamiliar.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Get my share my screen. Okay, good morning. Welcome. Here. Okay. Good morning, and thank you for attending our webinar on the Veteran-Owned Small Business Certification for Government Contracting. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the Apex Accelerators and what we do. So we're a nationwide network of procurement professionals working to bridge a gap between the buyer and the supplier. There are 96 centers across the U.S., all working towards the same goal, providing technical assistance to interested suppliers. And so, brief overview, we're a bridge between business and government. We're funded through federal sources, the Department of Defense, Office of Small Business Programs, and our state sources are the Partnership for Regional and Economic Performance. Our program has matching funds, and this enables our services to be provided for free. We serve businesses of all kinds, and we are assigned a geographical area. Here are the 8 counties that are represented by the Northwest Commission. And North Central 6-county area is part of a partnership consisting of North Central, Southern Alleghenies Planning and Development Commission, and Northern Tier Planning and Development Commission. And the map shows the counties of areas of representation. So some of our services is that we assess vendors for government contracting. We assist with registrations and certifications. We identify government and markets and specific contracting opportunities. We help prepare bids and proposals. We assist with post-award contract performance. We conduct educational workshops such as this one. We have free bid match services, and we help assist with getting specs and standards. We provide you with knowledge tools to successfully compete, and the goal is to help you win the government contracts. And again, some of our services, we assist with registration certifications, such as the System for Award Management and the PA Supplier Portal and the PA Supplier Registration. We help assist with the SBA certifications, such as the 8.8, the Hub Zone, the Women-Owned Small Business, the Economic Disadvantaged Women-Owned Small Business, the Veteran-Owned Small Business, and the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business. We also assist too with the state certifications. So just real quick, some of the things that the Apex Accelerators cannot do is we cannot provide general business or marketing assistance. We cannot write or submit proposals or bids. We cannot determine on or advise on pricing matters, and we cannot market on a client's behalf. So why do you want to sell the government? Well, the U.S. government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. The federal government spends billions of dollars on buying millions of items while assisting thousands of businesses. Local, state, and federal governments can be potentially lucrative markets for your company, and the government can be a loyal customer. So the bottom line is we are here to help and assist you. Here is the Northwest Commission's contact information. Don't worry about writing this down. We'll provide you with the slides and all this information. And again, here is the North Central's contact information. And again, because I'm in a partnership with Southern Alleghenies and Northern Tier, I provided their contact information also. And that's all I have. Thank you, Aaron.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Barb. Okay, so I am going to share my screen now. Sure. And I'm gonna work through something else set up here. Okie dokie. Alrighty, so thank you very much to Cindy and Barb for your part of this presentation, and thank you very much to Cindy for helping to for setting this up and inviting us to present. Always really appreciate it. And I want to give a huge thank you to any veterans we have in the call today for your service. We literally wouldn't be here without you all and the sacrifices that you made. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope that you'll come away from today's presentation with some information that you can use. So again, just want to give a shout out, thank you to the co-sponsors for this event, PennWest, SBDC, and North Central. Also wanted to say a little bit about our host agency, the Northwest Commission, for those of you who are unfamiliar. So the Northwest Commission is a local development district. LDD is the industry term. The idea behind an LDD is that they work to identify the priority needs of the local communities that they serve. And then based on those needs, the commission will work with their board members and other local citizens to help develop plans for their community's economic development. We cover 8 counties. Again, same 8 counties that the Northwest Commission Apex Accelerator covers. So Clarion, Crawford, Erie, Forest, Lawrence, Venango, Mercer, and Warren. If you want to learn more about the services that we offer, because the Northwest Commission does offer more services than our own Apex Accelerator program. For example, we have an international marketing or export program, business financing program. If you want to learn more about those programs or different ways to get involved, you can go to our newly redesigned website to learn more. And if we have anyone here who is outside of our 8-county service region, don't worry, there isn't a single county in Pennsylvania that isn't covered by a local development district. Just go ahead and shoot us an email and we can help get you pointed in the right direction. Okay, so real quick, I am going to stop my video right now just so you guys aren't distracted by my ugly mug, and we'll get into the meat of this presentation. So this webinar is going to cover veteran-owned certification. What is it and why would I want to become certified? Why would I want my business to become certified? And that's going to focus more on the federal side of things. We're also going to cover how the program has recently changed because the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, used to be the one controlling this program, administering it rather. And the SBA took over as of this year, and they made a number of changes that, in my opinion, were for the better. But we want to cover those changes just so you know, because there has been a lot of videos and resources out there for a long time about the rules under the VA. Want to make certain everyone's clear about how it's operating now under the SBA. We'll also go into the requirements that you need to meet to be eligible for the program. And then at the end, we'll do a brief discussion about how that federal veteran-owned certification can open up opportunities for you in state government contracting, not just federal. So since the government loves their acronyms, I've included a guide to all of the ones that are relevant to this topic here. I'm not going to go over all of these because it's going to be difficult for you to remember them without context. But my promise to you is that if I use an acronym during this presentation, I'll explain what it is. This is more for if you're reviewing the slide deck after today and you're trying to remember what a particular acronym means, and you will get access to all of these slide decks once the presentation is over. So moving into the first topic, veteran certification. What is it and why would I want my business to become certified? Well, so there are 2 different certifications that the federal government has for veterans. One is VOSB, Veteran-Owned Small Business, and the other is SDVOSB, Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business. And we'll go a little bit more into the different definitions of what's a VOSB, what's an SDVOSB when we talk about the eligibility. But for now, big picture, it is a free certification. You may have heard it called a verification. That was the VA's term when the program was administered under their Center for Verification and Evaluation. Realistically, no difference between the two. I think the VA just wanted to be different and special. But anyway, as of right now, under this certification, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses and veteran-owned small businesses are evaluated and determined eligible based on federal regulations. So that regulation in this case is 13 CFR Part 128. For those of you who are unfamiliar, CFR is the Code of Federal Regulations. It's essentially the giant administrative rule book that contains all of the rules created by federal agencies. So not laws passed by Congress, but regulations passed by agencies. Think EPA, Department of Energy, etc. It is a 3-year certification with unlimited opportunities to renew. So as long as you stay eligible, as long as you stay within the guidelines of the program, you can renew the certification for as many times as you want. There is no hard cutoff date for how long you can be certified. And it allows you to be listed in the SBA's Certified Veteran Small Business Database, and I believe the Dynamic Small Business Search as well, which is another database that SBA maintains for all small businesses that are registered in the federal website, sam.gov. I believe the veteran company's veteran status is listed there as well. Here's 2 links. One is the website that on the SBA that actually talks about their government contracting assistance programs, the veteran one in particular, and the other is the website that you actually use to become certified. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at that a little bit later. And next slide. Okay. So why would you want to become certified? Well, we'll talk about the VA first, because even though they are not responsible for the certification program anymore, they really are a big chunk of why you would want to become certified. So going back a little bit, story time. Back in 2006, Congress passed the Veterans Benefits, Healthcare, and Information Technology Act of 2006. And that gave the VA a unique authority for contracting with SDVOSBs and VOSBs. And the form that the VA decided to take that law and put it into place as is their Vets First program. And because of the Vets First program, the VA operates off of a pretty unique 5-tier procurement hierarchy. So any time that the VA has a need for a service or a physical good, they are going to try and determine whether or not they can justify setting it aside for service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses before they do anything else. And set-asides work by literally setting aside solicitations so that only certain categories of businesses can compete for them. So if they set it aside for an SDVOSB, only certified SDVOSB firms can participate. But if they can't justify setting it aside for SDVOSBs, they'll try and set it aside for veteran-owned small businesses. Failing that, they'll try and set it aside for 8A or Hub Zone certified programs. If they can't find any of those, they'll try and set it aside for women-owned small businesses, economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses, or just normal small businesses. And finally, if they can't justify setting it aside, period, they'll open it up to full and open competition, which means that large businesses will get their crack at the solicitation as well. So again, only, as I kind of alluded to this before, but only SBA certified firms are eligible to participate in VA set-asides for veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Now, the rules are a little different regarding set-asides for non-VA agencies, but we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. Moving on to some more information about why you'd want to be certified. Well, we already talked about the opportunities to participate in VA set-asides, but there are subcontracting opportunities as well that on contracts with SDVOSB or VOSB goals as well, and especially if you're working for the VA, certification may be required for those. And while the VA is not the 10-ton gorilla of procurement that is the Department of Defense, it is still one of the largest federal government procurement organizations because at the end of the day, they are providing healthcare and all of the buildings and equipment that come with it. That's expensive, so they generally, in year over year, they'll typically award over $3 billion a year to veteran-owned small businesses. And certified companies can also display a logo to be used for marketing purposes and advertising to large prime contractors and agencies. So SBA released their updated VOSB and SDVOSB logos when they took over the program. Once you're certified, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to access these logos. Now, according to the SBA, there aren't currently any plans to prohibit the use of the old VA CVE branding. We have been recommending that companies may want to use both brands while the SBA works to publicize their ownership of the program. That being said, it's been almost a year now. I'd say you're safe to just use the SBA logo, although this is just myself, Aaron, talking. My program manager, Robin, or Melissa might have a different word, but I would say you're safe to just use the SBA logo, especially if you're a newly certified company. Some other reasons you might want to be certified: it'll minimize the chance of your veteran status being protested in federal contracting. Again, your name will be listed on the SBA's searchable list of VOSBs and SDVOSBs, just one more place for potential customers to find you, potential federal or contracting customers to find you, I should say. State level wise, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but depending on which certification you get, being federally certified can qualify a small business for PA's Small Diverse Business Contracting Program and or their Veteran Business Enterprise certification. And other states have programs like this as well. We'll just be focusing on Pennsylvania for the purposes of this presentation. From the government standpoint, what the certification does is it allows them to cut down on fraud. You may have heard of so-called rent-a-vet schemes, where companies will pay a veteran to essentially act as a figurehead to the organization so that the companies can try and wheedle their way in and get in on the SDVOSB or VOSB set-asides, even though the veteran in question really doesn't have anything to do with the actual running of the business. Having the certification helps to cut down on that fraud. It doesn't eliminate it entirely, but it does help quite a bit. So I'm going to talk about the federal government's set-aside program as a whole first, and then we'll move on to how it applies to non-VA agencies for certified veteran businesses. So the federal government establishes formal goals to ensure that small businesses get their fair share of work in the federal market. It isn't all just hoovered up by Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Leidos, etc. Specifically, the Small Business Act requires that 23% of federal prime contracting dollars be awarded to small businesses, with individual prime and subcontracting goals for certain identified small business groups. And there are goals for certain socioeconomic categories as well. So we have 23% for small businesses, 5% for women-owned small businesses, 12% for small disadvantaged businesses, 3% for hub zone, and 3% for SDVOSB. So these goals aren't applied evenly across every government agency. Each agency at the beginning of the fiscal year negotiates its own goals with the SBA, and their collective goals are added together to meet the government-wide goals listed here. You may notice something is missing from this list, however. There are no set-asides for veteran-owned small businesses outside of the VA, and there's no predetermined hierarchy either. Whether or not a contracting officer sets a solicitation aside is just based off of the government's market research for that particular solicitation, although contracting officers can take their agency's current goal standing into account when determining what set aside to use. That's per FAR 19.203. And quick definition, FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. It is essentially the procurement Bible for all federal contracting officers. It tells them how they need to go about doing their job, and it also determines what particular clauses they have to put into your contracts and subcontracts. Now, getting back to the topic at hand, There are certain rules for set-asides depending on the dollar amount of the solicitation, but we're not going to get into that today. Ask your Apex Accelerator if you're interested in learning more. So, important note for almost all federal agencies other than the VA. So, contracting officers can set aside contracts for SDVOSBs per FAR 19.14, but it follows the rule of two. This is part of the market research I was talking about before. The CO has to show a reasonable expectation through market research that two or more responsible SDVOSBs will submit offers and the award will be made at fair market price. So the government likes competition to have as much competition as possible, even when they're setting solicitations aside. So because they're setting it aside and potentially reducing the amount of competition they'll get for it, they want to be able to see that you can expect companies to actually put in and bid on the solicitation if they set it aside, and that by setting it aside, that particular good or service won't have its price jacked up to an unreasonable degree. And keep in mind, this is the same procedure that any agency, including the VA, has to follow to justify a set-aside contract. Now, according to 13 CFR 128.401, any company that is certified as a small business in SAM, System for Award Management, that's the main contracting hub for the federal government. Any business that's certified as a small business in SAM is allowed to self-certify as an SDVOSB for non-VA set-aside and sole source contracts, provided that you've turned a complete application into the SBA, and then you can self-certify until the SBA has made that determination. That being said, that exception, there's a cutoff date for it, and that cutoff date is December 31st, 2023. So that deadline is coming up soon. Starting next year, you will need to be formally certified to participate in any set-aside contracts, VA or non-VA. The one exception to that being said, got to stop myself and go back a little bit. Self-certified SDVOSBs will continue to count for subcontracting and agency SDVOSB utilization goal credit. So if a self-certified company is awarded a contract on a full and open contract or just a small business set aside, they will still count for towards that agency's goal use. For now, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The one exception to the self-certification requirement is the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. FAA is kind of a strange ranger in the world of procurement. It doesn't follow the FAR or the Small Business Act. It follows its own procurement code called the Acquisition Management System. It's also the only non-VA agency that currently requires SDVOSB companies be formally certified. And this is a link to the SBA informational page, again, about the government's better-known small business contracting programs, including some information about the program transfer. Word of warning about that page, though, there is a chart that makes it seem like the FAA has veteran-owned small business set-asides, and I do not believe that they do. I didn't see anything in the AMS about veteran-owned small business set-asides. Okay, so I'm going to check the Q&A here. Does anyone have any questions regarding the what and the why of becoming certified? I'm going to move this over here. So if you meet multiple statutory goals when bidding, Susan's asking, does that push you to the top, i.e. the more you have, the better it is? So Susan, meeting multiple certification goals doesn't really push you to the top. It'll make you more eligible. It'll make you eligible for more set-asides, depending on what the contractor's market research is. But contracting officers aren't allowed to specifically pick a company based off of their socioeconomic status. They can set solicitations aside based on status, but they can't award an actual contract based off of it. You still have to provide either the best price or the best value proposition, the best solution to the government's problem. What we always say is that these types of socioeconomic certifications are kind of like a cherry on top of the value proposition that you already offer. Does that answer your question, Susan?
The name is
Oh, and Susan, I saw that you had another question answered. Okay, awesome. All right, so Brett is asking, so there is a potential non-VA advantage to having an owner actually submit legitimate claims. He's just stubborn about not doing it to register as an SDVOSB rather than just as a VOSB. So yes, Brett, there is, being an SDVOSB does offer you more advantages. We'll go into a little bit more detail about what the government considers the difference to be between a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, or rather, what's the difference between a service-disabled veteran and a normal veteran, normal in quotation marks. But yes, there is a non-VA advantage to being an SDVOSB. Whether or not the company owner wants to actually be identified as service disabled, whether they want to take those claims to the VA and get that process started, that is going to be a personal decision on their account. That's just something that they have to weigh. I sympathize. I do have clients who are service disabled veterans realistically, but they just don't want to. But they don't want to submit their put in to be service disabled for whatever reason, and so they just went with veteran-owned small business. It's just a personal decision that each person has to make for themselves. Okay, and Melissa, I see you are working on Kenneth's answer. Thank you very much for monitoring the chat. FYI, everyone, I don't know if I may have forgotten to mention this before, but I will stop at a couple predetermined points throughout this webinar to check them, to check the Q&A, but Melissa and Barb, and I believe Robin is here as well. They will be in the they will be watching the Q&A in the chat and answering questions. Okie dokie then. Okay, so going to continue then, moving on. So now we'll move on to reviewing the major changes to the program as a result of its move from the VA to the SBA. If I can get my slides to work, here we go. So November 29th of last year, the SBA released the final rule of what the program would look like in the newly created 13 CFR 128. The VA's regulation was under 13 CFR Part 125. So if you see 13 CFR 125 on any guidance floating around, on any YouTube videos or physical resources, that is old information. And while the changes between the VA and the SBA weren't earth-shatteringly massive, some of that guidance may still apply. It's always best to get the most up-to-date information. So, make certain that you are checking 13 CFR 128, and that any guidance that you're looking at, any resources, is citing that specific rule. 13 CFR Part 128 created the Veteran Small Business Certification Program, VetCert for short. And the eligibility rules are mostly similar to the SBA's ownership and control rules for other socioeconomic programs. SBA has been making a pretty big push for standardization across their various socioeconomic certifications, which is good for a number of reasons, but one of which is that veterans and service-disabled veterans who run companies that are already certified under the 8A program for socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses, or the women-owned small business program, will have reciprocity. Reciprocity means that you'll have an expedited review and approval process. Instead of going through the entire process, you just certify that there have been no material changes to the ownership and control of the company, since your 8A or WOSB certification, and then the SBA would accept that previous determination. So all that would be left is for the SBA, through the VA, I believe, because I believe the VA is still doing this part, is to confirm the owners have either a veteran or service-disabled veteran status, and then you'd be on your way. If your firm was previously verified under the VA's CBE, you'll still be considered certified until the end of your current term. And that includes a one-year extension that the SBA announced back on December 9th of 2022. The SBA wanted to push back the renewals of companies that were already verified so that they could concentrate on the influx of self-certified companies that have now found themselves all of a sudden needing formal certification. This isn't necessarily a change because I don't know what the VA's processing times were before, but I do believe that the SBA's goal is to have a certification decision made within 30 days, although that can vary if more information is needed. More changes. You don't have to be small under specifically your primary NAICS code anymore. So for those of you who don't know, NAICS is North American Industry Classification System code. Essentially, it is a code that denotes what industry you operate in. And when you go through your SAM.gov registration, the one part of the registration is that you will be asked to pick which NAICS codes your company falls under, for a number of reasons. And it used to be you'd have to be small under specifically your primary NAICS code. The one that you picked as the main NAICS code on your profile. But now, as long as you're small under any NAICS code on your SAM profile, you're eligible for certification. And for those of you who don't understand small with regards to NAICS codes, the SBA maintains size standards for each NAICS code. Manufacturers is typically based off of number of employees. Service companies, it'll usually be based off of your average annual revenue. And they can vary. So you can be small under one NAICS code and large under another. But as long as you're small under at least one NAICS code on your SAM profile, you'll qualify for certification. What hasn't changed, though, is that to be eligible for a set-aside or a sole source contract, you'll need to be small under the NAICS code for that particular solicitation. Under the new rule, a company can self-certify that they're an SDVOSB, but they can't compete for any SDVOSB set-asides unless they have a complete application into the SBA until next year. They will, however, continue to count towards an agency's contracting goals, that 3% goal we talked about earlier. This was a bit of a surprise when that came out because the NDAA, the 2021 NDAA that mandated the program move, also mandated that the SBA do away with self-certification. But the SBA is taking the position that for now, it's better to have the VETCERT program in line with their other socioeconomic programs. They are planning on sunsetting self-certification entirely within the next 5 years through a separate rule. Another change, the good character review is almost entirely gone. So company owners that are actively incarcerated, on parole, or on probation will no longer have that held against them for the purposes of veteran certification. SBA is taking the opinion that those issues are not relevant to whether or not a company is owned by a veteran or a service-disabled veteran. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't mean that if you're running a company and you're on parole for embezzling money from your last one, doesn't mean you'll be considered responsible when you've been on a contract, because part of being responsible in the government's eyes is being ethical. The SBA isn't saying that those issues aren't negative. They're just saying that whether or not those issues disqualify you from receiving a contract is a question for the contracting officer to decide. But if a company is suspended from federal contracting, the SBA will propose the firm for decertification. And if a company is debarred entirely, the SBA will just immediately decertify it. The VA had, regarding the rebuttable presumptions, so the VA had pretty strict rules regarding who they consider to control an SDVOSB or VOSB, and those included a list of rebuttable presumptions. business conditions that the VA took as a sign of a lack of true veteran control. So, for instance, there is a rebuttable presumption that if your former employer is part of the management or ownership of your new company and they're not a service-disabled veteran, then a service-disabled veteran doesn't control the company. They kind of assumed that your old boss is the one really pulling the strings. Well, the SBA has released a non-exhaustive list of rebuttable presumptions that's in 13 CFR 128.203H2. And that list has been revised to be more in line with 8A program regulations on control. And they've left some legal wiggle room to acknowledge that in certain circumstances, those situations can occur without it impacting the veteran's control. Speaking of control, the veteran is no longer required to work for the company, full-time at normal operating hours for the industry, provided that you can provide documentation that that particular veteran has ultimate control of the company. This is a huge boon for startups and side hustles where a veteran is trying to get their company off the ground while also working a full-time job to pay the bills. And that's not a bad idea, by the way. It can take a while to win your first government contract and longer to get to a point where you're consistently winning government contracts. And we've already seen some clients taking advantage of this. Companies are no longer required to keep a copy of their application materials at their principal place of business, because in a world of remote work and cloud computing, that's not really a relevant concept anymore. Non-qualifying veterans are now allowed a right of first refusal without impacting the qualifying veteran's ownership. So, a couple definitions here. Qualifying means that the company's eligibility is based on the veteran in question. Non-qualifying means that the person is a veteran, but their status isn't what you're basing the eligibility on. Right of first refusal is the right of a certain party to enter into a business transaction with a person or a company before anyone else. So essentially, like minority owner putting in a rule that says if the majority owner wants to sell their shares of the company, they get first crack at those shares. Previously, right of first refusal could impact the qualifying owner's veteranship determination. Veteranship, good Lord, that's a word. Having a right of first refusal could previously impact the qualifying veteran's ownership determination. But now under the SBA, so long as that right of first refusal would be considered commercially reasonable and it's given to a veteran, it won't impact the ownership determination. The SBA hasn't really provided a definition of commercially reasonable, but at least it's a little more leeway than you had before. Franchises. VA used to be very, very strict on franchises. It was very difficult to get a franchise certified. Franchises are still going to be decided on a case-by-case basis, but the SBA has said that the main things that they look for, that they are looking for, are whether the franchisee has the right to profits and risk of losses commensurate with ownership, and that is much looser than what the VA used to grade them against. Companies that were denied certification can now reapply after 90 days. Under the VA, you had to wait 6 months. The SBA can conduct the program examinations in person or virtually, keeping with the theme of remote work. Program examinations, by the way, they can be done at random, or if the SBA receives a credible complaint that your company isn't eligible. Also, veterans no longer have to live within a reasonable commute of the company's headquarters or job site locations. This was a rule that the VA had, and they'd interpreted that you have to live within 150 miles of the company headquarters or job site. Thankfully, the SBA has taken that out entirely. Joint venture rules. So joint ventures, for those of you who don't know, it is essentially a company formed as a joint venture between 2 or more companies. So forming a new company together specifically for the purposes of going after government contracts. If a certified company forms a joint venture with another small business, that joint venture doesn't have to be certified to go after VOSB or SDVOSB set-asides. Now, that is provided that the SDVOSB or VOSB is the managing venturer, the company responsible for the day-to-day management of the job. And the certified company also needs to own at least 51% of the joint venture company. There's a bunch more rules regarding joint ventures, so if you have any questions, ask your Apex counselor. Okay, so a similarly situated entity needs to be certified to qualify under the limitations of subcontracting. Another quick aside, essentially, when you're awarded a set-aside contract, you don't have to perform all of that work yourself. You can subcontract some of it out. But there are limitations on how much you can sub out to prevent large companies from using small ones as a front. And those limitations can vary based on the type of contract. But work by similarly situated entities, i.e. companies that have the same certifications as you do, counts towards the prime contractor's percentage. So, for example, if you're doing a service contract, the prime has to do at least 50% of the work. But if you do 40% and a similarly situated entity does another 20%, you're compliant. This rule clarifies that any subcontractor you count as a similarly situated entity needs to be formally VOSB or SDVOSB certified. They can't just be self-certified. Finally, in keeping with all of these changes, the upfront document requirements for certification are much smaller than they were under the VA. The documents you do need vary a bit based on the legal structure of your business. So talk to your Apex counselor if this is sounding like something you're interested in pursuing. Okay, so here's one of the biggest changes of the program transfer, the website you use to access the certification program. So the new website is veterans.certify.sba.gov. I've hyperlinked it here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this website just because of time constraints. But this, at the bottom of this thing, you see the search bar here. This is where you can search for veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. And this is also where you register to fill out your application. You can see that red sign-in button at the top right. Keep in mind, this is a unique website for the SBA. So you will need to create a new login account for this website. And it's not a form that you fill out. It's kind of like a guided process where it'll take you to several different pages throughout. Each page has you enter in some different information, upload some documentation. I've helped a few clients do this website, and it is actually pretty well designed. There's a lot of fail safes. So if you select an option that would potentially mark you as ineligible, the website will let you know and it'll stop you from moving forward. They had an actual SDVOSB build the website, so that probably helped. Company knew that all the decisions that they made for this website would affect them down the line. Okay, so I see we have a couple things in the Q&A. So before we move on to eligibility requirements, I'm going to take a look at these. Susan Highland. Okay, yes, Susan, these changes are in place now. They have been in place since the beginning of the year. They started as soon as the SBA took it over. Okay, so to apply for expedited reciprocity as a WOSB, for example, do you have to apply for veteran certification through SBA first, or can you go straight to the ecfr.gov website? For expedited reciprocity, as it turns out, for veteran-owned small businesses, I believe you would need to be WOSB certified first. I am not certain as to whether or not the WOSB program has that function that has the same reciprocity built into their certification website yet. But Susan, I'm not certain if you are already working with your Apex counselor, but if you aren't, reach out to us and we will do a little bit of digging and see. I would imagine, given that the idea of reciprocity, I would imagine you could apply for either one first, and then you could just go through and just upload any additional documentation, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I will say that if you're wanting to apply as both a WOSB and a VOSB, you might want to do the VOSB or SDVOSB certification first. because the veteran-owned small business program, they have a goal to get all your applications processed within a month. Woman-owned small business, I have heard from a couple clients, it is taking 6 months to a year because it's they're just, that particular program is just really backed up. Already there and already certified in PA for WOSB. Okay, so Susan, that might whether or not the reciprocity works may determine as to whether you are federally certified under the SBA. Or if you're just state certified under the WeBank or the PAUCP. So definitely talk with us and we will help clear that up for you. Okay. Any other question? Melissa, thanks for clearing the questions. Any other questions we have before we move on? Not seeing any. Okay, give me 1 second, guys. Going to hydrate. And I'm going to try and get, and I know we're buttoning it, we got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to try and get us through this before noon. If anyone has to jump off for lunch or another meeting, I apologize. I'll try and get through this as quick as possible. So 4 tenets of being a VOSB or an SDVOSB. It needs to be a small business owned by a veteran or service-disabled veteran, and the veteran in question, the qualifying veteran or veterans, need to have unconditional and direct ownership and control of the company. We'll talk about all 4 of these sections in detail throughout the next couple slides. So, small business. Again, you need to be a small business under any NAICS code in your company SAM profile, and we already talked a little bit about what being a small business means. You also need to be organized for profit, not debarred or suspended from government contracting, federal contracting at least. You can't have any open federal financial obligations like back taxes without a payment plan. And of course, to be small under a NAICS code in your SAM profile, you need to be registered in sam.gov. There are, slides went a little wonky there. There are currently 6 business types that are eligible to apply for certification. Sole proprietorship, C Corp, S Corp, limited liability company, general partnership, or limited liability partnership. Keep in mind, I have recently ran into some clients where they are, just for example, hypothetical, their company is legally set up as an LLC, but they are taxed as a partnership. You would want to use the documents that correspond to what your company is legally registered as with your Department of State, not how you're taxed. So if you're legally an LLC but taxed like a partnership, fill out the documents and provide the documents for the LLC. Also, a quick note regarding startups. A new firm does need to be established to a certain degree in order to obtain certification. A lot of what this program goes off of is your company bylaws, your operating agreement, your articles of incorporation. These need to be done already. You can't be still writing those and still get certification. Now, if there are some documents that aren't applicable to you, you can provide an explanation, a letter of explanation describing why they're not available. But in general, you want to make certain that you're providing all available information and documents at the time of submission. Veteran definition. So the veteran is, for 13 CFR 128, is defined as someone who served on active duty with the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard for any length of time, and who were discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. This also includes reservists or members of the National Guard who were called to federal active duty other than training, or if you were disabled or injured while in training status, then you'll still count as a veteran. Service-disabled veteran is a veteran with a disability rating letter from the VA establishing a service-connected disability rating between 0 and 100, or if you have a disability determination from the DoD, or if you're registered in the Burroughs Beneficiary Identification and Records Locator Subsystem that is maintained by the VA as a service-disabled veteran. This also includes reservists or members of the National Guard who were disabled from a disease or injury incurred in the line of duty or while in training status. Ownership and control. So you need at least 51% of the business to be directly and unconditionally owned by one or more veterans or service-disabled veterans. This is calculated without regard for community property laws, although PA doesn't have those laws. I just like to put that disclaimer in. And keep in mind, when they say 51%, they mean 51%. You can't get by with like a 50.1% majority. There was actually a court case recently where a company lost a set-aside contract and got their certification revoked on a protest because the veteran in question only had majority control, not 51%. Maybe a little silly, but that's how they do it. Ownership has to be direct, owned by a person, not a holding company. There are some exceptions for certain trusts, but they're pretty limited. A subsidiary can't be a veteran-owned small business, even if the parent company is. Unconditional control means full decision-making authority, both the strategic and long-term decisions that you typically associate with like a board of directors and the day-to-day decisions of the company as well. Unconditional also means no restrictions on what the veteran owner can do with their shares, no restrictions on or assignments of voting rights aside from the commercially reasonable right of first refusal we talked about before. And the status can also be retained if a service-disabled veteran passes away and the surviving spouse acquires ownership. Contact your Apex Accelerator if you have questions about that. I don't want to get into the weeds on that given the time. In general, the veteran also needs to be the highest compensated and hold the highest officer position. But keep in mind that the veteran or veterans that own the company don't have to be the same ones that control the company. All right. So some red flags that you may see when it comes to ownership and control. If the business documents state that the veteran doesn't have full decision-making power, that is obviously a huge issue. If the veteran owner doesn't supply evidence to support that they have the training, education, or experience in the field of work that the business is in. And you don't necessarily need to have the technical expertise, but at the very least, you need to have the business acumen needed to manage your employees that have that technical experience. Again, this is just safeguarding against figureheads and rent-a-vet schemes. The veteran owner can take a lower salary than a regular employee, but there needs to be a logical explanation submitted by the veteran as to how taking that lower salary helps a business. Again, we already talked about a member of the applying company if they are a former employer or principal of a former employer, that can be a red flag. If the company has business relationships that cause such dependence that the qualifying veteran can't exercise independent judgment without risk. So if you have 80% of your business coming from one private company, that's going to be taken as a potential red flag because then you are in your own way beholden to that other company. Because if they yank their business, then your company is probably going under or just being devastated and cut in half. If a non-qualifying person controls the applicant through loan arrangements, crucial bonding or financial support, or critical license for the company, that's a red flag as well. Red flags, some more. If an applicant knowingly lied on their application, that is obviously a red flag. If a company or the owners themselves are debarred or suspended from government contracting, and suspending means you're temporarily banned from government contracting pending a hearing. Debarment means you're banned entirely for a set period of time. And of course, another red flag, if company or their principals have failed to pay significant financial obligations to the federal government without a payment plan. All right, I see we have one more Q&A. We're almost done with this webinar. Oh, just Brett saying thank you. You're very welcome, Brett. So I know I kind of breezed through that kind of quickly. Does anyone have any questions about this, about the eligibility requirements for the veteran? And again, I know that there can be some details on this. If you guys have any questions, give us a phone call, shoot us an email. We'll help get your question answered. All right, so I'm going to move on then if we don't have any other questions. Nope. All righty, so Pennsylvania. So how this certification plays when it comes to contracting with the state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania has its own small business reserve program. It's a little silly because Pennsylvania lays down a blanket rule across all industries that to be small, you need to be for-profit, United States business, independently owned, not dominant in its field of operation, but you can't employ more than 100 full-time equivalent employees, and you can't exceed a 3-year average gross revenues of 47 million. Again, that's regardless of business type. So you can have 300 employees and be considered small federally, but you won't be considered small in the eyes of Pennsylvania. Now, they did just recently update the 3-year average gross revenue threshold. I am hoping that they might update the number of employees somewhere down the line, but I haven't heard anything about that. Good to know when it comes to Pennsylvania, there are no set-asides for S4. There's only set-asides for small businesses. There aren't set-asides for veteran business enterprises or small diverse businesses, but there is prime contracting gold credit as well as subcontracting gold credit on certain procurements. Current small diverse business goal is 26.3% the Pennsylvania government wants to award to SDBs, 4.6% for veteran business enterprises. So having the VOSB certification from the SBA qualifies your firm as a veteran business enterprise. Having the SDVOSB certification qualifies you as both a veteran business enterprise and a small diverse business. So having an SDB lets you get 2 certifications in one, provided that you're still under Pennsylvania's guidelines for small businesses. And I've given you some additional links here as well. Here's how you would be certified. Number one, you would need to register in the PA supplier portal. That's kind of like the SAM of Pennsylvania. It's required in order to do business with any Pennsylvania state agency. It's usually pretty quick. Again, it's completely free. I can't remember if I mentioned this as well, but the SBA certification is completely free as well. Don't trust anyone who says that you need to pay like $600 or something to register. They are lying. So once you register in the PA supplier portal, you will then go to the state's PRISM system. And we typically recommend that we help you guys with this, but we can typically get you through it in about a half hour or so. What you will do is you will self-certify as a small business first by providing your number of employees and average yearly revenues. Then you'll also need to upload the first page of your business taxes as well to confirm that. And then you will certify as either a veteran business enterprise or a small diverse business. That means you'll need to upload your application, your certification letter from the SBA, and you'll also need to upload a screenshot of your company's listing on the SBA's search engine. And of course, all of this we can help you, as I said, we can help you with. All right, that is more or less the end of the my presentation. We are Apex Accelerators. We are your free or minimal cost resource to help you with all of your government contracting needs, so long as it isn't providing official legal advice or literally creating a document or a proposal for you. We are your one-stop shop Sherpas to navigating the world of government contracting. I'm going to give one last huge thank you to any veterans we have on the call for your service. And to our co-sponsors for today's session, PennWest, Clarion, SBDC, North Central Apex Accelerator. I've again listed our contact information here on the side. And please remember, Cindy will be sending you guys out an evaluation survey. Please complete it, send us back, even if it's just, wow, that dude's voice was really annoying. We appreciate all the feedback and it helps us to develop better trainings in the future. So thank you very much. Cindy, I will stop my share. Let me check the Q&A real quick to see if there are any other things. That has a question, but Melissa's working on it. Thank you very much, Melissa. All right, I'll shut up now, Cindy. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. And also thank you to Barb and Melissa and to Robin for joining us today and helping bring this great topic of information to all of you. And as Aaron said, we will be sending out a survey following today's webinar. We just ask that you complete it. Let us know what you thought about today, but also what kind of training you're looking for in the future, the format of training and the timing of training. All that information really makes our jobs a little bit easier moving forward. So with that, I'm going to close out today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to having you join us in future webinars. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Have a great day.